They're 3-0. We're going into week 4, and we've got a fun matchup here with the Arizona Cardinals. The 49ers here thus far, they have dominated, so to say, 30 points a game, just 14 on the opposite side. Now they got a nice week 4 matchup. But before we get into all the breakdowns, got to go ahead and say what's up to my co-host today, JonnyDel. How you doing, my man?
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. It feels good to be expecting some 49ers football in a couple days. That Thursday night matchup always makes it feel just so long before the next game.
I know. I mean, especially like I don't know why. It just felt like an eternity without football. And like I cover two teams. I cover the Wisconsin Badgers out here as well. And it's been an interesting week because I had a Thursday game last week and a Friday game last week. No football over the weekend, and then the Badgers are on a bye week, so I don't have football tomorrow either. This is the longest layoff of football that I'm gonna have for a long period of time, and I'm craving some football. I'll say that.
Yeah, that's a little ways. I mean, you are definitely emaciated for football.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good and a bad thing because the good part is that allowed me to watch some extra Arizona Cardinals film for the first time all year. Did not think I was going to say that often this season, but here we are. They're 1-2. They've been competitive, and that's where we'll start off. Before we get into the matchup itself, we've got to talk about the opponent because they're an interesting team. What have you seen from the Arizona Cardinals thus far?
One, as much as we wanted to give Jonathan Gannon some crap and some stuff for the videos that were being put out and how awkward he looked with the players, I will tell you the effort was there on film. You saw a team that, I mean, there was a lot of effort in how they played. There was a lot of fire in how they played. I mean, you could even see it on the film. I remember sitting there going, wait a minute, was that Kyler Murray? Because you could see Kyler Murray just going ballistic on the sidelines. He looked more excited than he did when he was playing last year. And so I do think that speaks something to Jonathan Gannon and what he's doing there. On the other I think as well with it, their run game looks very effective. It's not overly diverse, but it's very effective in what it does. You can tell he brought a lot of the ideas that he brought or that he saw there in Philadelphia and what they were doing with Jalen Hurts with him to Arizona, and is looking to stress the defense in a lot of the same ways. So I think it'll be an interesting matchup. It'll be something that, hopefully that they're a little ahead on some game planning with it, being able to go back to last year and look at what they were planning on doing with the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. You're going to see a lot of the same stuff from the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, I mean, the Arizona Cardinals through 3 weeks, I mean, you got to say that they've been competitive. You look at their matchups, they faced the Commanders, they faced the Giants, and they faced the Cowboys. And through in all 3 games, they've led at halftime. It's not like, when you look at these scores, it's telling a different story. I mean, it's been a 4-point loss to the Commanders, a 1-score game, a 3-point loss to the Giants, a 1-score game, and then a 2-score victory over the Dallas Cowboys this past week. It's been some interesting football for sure when it comes to the Arizona Cardinals and the way that they've been able to execute, but more so compete with the roster differences between them and other teams this season. And like you said, some of that credit definitely has to go to the scheme, the way that Jonathan Gannon has, incorporated that defense over there in Arizona. And again, you can make whatever argument you want about the talent of teams, but you can't deny that the Dallas Cowboys, that one was a shocker given that they were a near 10-point favorite going into that game. Let's hone in on that game specifically. What did you see offensively and defensively from the Cardinals in week 3?
Well, on the offensive side of the ball for the Cardinals, you saw that they really stressed Dallas's ability to account for the quarterback in the run game. And I don't know if you could say it was a trap game for the Cowboys. They did not look well prepared. They didn't look like they were all on the same page as to how they were going to play a lot of this stuff. For example, there was a run, I believe it was in the first quarter, where quarterback, he takes it and he picked up something like 20 yards. And it was an instance where they had the quarterback option baked into it. Nobody accounted for the quarterback as a threat on that, and he just takes it and runs off the edge, picks up like 20 yards, something like that. It was a big gainer, and that set up a field goal. And then I believe that set up the field goal. And then you had one where they scored a big touchdown. It was like a 38-yard touchdown run. I put it on my Twitter where they spread them out. They're running the quarterback. It's an inside zone with quarterback option on it. Both Van Der Esch and Armstrong, their defensive end, account for the quarterback on that play. They're both accounting for the quarterback. That leaves the offense 5-on-4 in blocking. That's not what you want as a defense. You don't want the offense to be +1. You want to be +1 as a defense in defending the run. They're -1 in the run game, and the running back goes for like 40 yards for a touchdown. That's just bad football. That's not how the Cowboys. I can guarantee you, Dan Quinn did not go into that game saying, if we're 4 defenders on 5 blockers in their run game, I'm really happy. That's not how you go into that game planning. And so there's a miscommunication on the defense. There's a miscue somewhere. Somebody, either Van Der Esch was supposed to be inside on the run, and Armstrong on the quarterback. Armstrong is supposed to crash down on the running back, and Van Der Esch take the quarterback. Somewhere in there, somebody didn't keep that communication, and that was just a lot of the story of Dallas's game. Van Der Esch, to me, looked slow to the point on a lot of things. It looked like that quarterback option movement in there really slowed him down, and he wasn't decisive on either one. The one thing when you have a quarterback option baked in is that players have to be decisive. They cannot hesitate. Because if they do, especially with a quarterback that can get out and move, you got to attack. And I would not be surprised if Steve Wilks comes out with our 5 defensive linemen front to combat this a lot in this game. I don't think the Cardinals receivers match up really, really well against our corners. I see us being able to cover them in man coverage, and I wouldn't not be surprised if you see a lot of man coverage from Steve Wilks in this game. He's going to put 5 defensive linemen on there. He's going to simplify the assignments and say, we're not going to let you get numbers inside in the run game. You're going to have to block Javon Hargrave one-on-one. You're going to have to block Eric Armstead one-on-one. You're going to have to block Javon Kinlaw one-on-one. And we're going to account for the quarterback and let Dre Greenlaw and Fred roam and then match up on the outside. That's how I see us going after their offense.
There's a lot that you just talked about in the run game, and we're going to break it down. Tell me, though, real quick, what did you see from the Arizona Cardinals in their aerial attack? Because Josh Dobbs, 17 of 21, 189 yards, 1 touchdown, fairly efficient. Do you believe that itself is going to be a threat as well, or do you believe that a majority of this Arizona offense is going to be dictated by the run, and that's the major impact of how they could potentially change the game?
I think as far as their aerial attack, you have to get off the field on 3rd down. When you watch that game, one thing, Dallas committed a lot of penalties. It's like 12 penalties, and a bunch of those were on passing plays. It was either offsides or you'd have a defensive holding or a defensive pass interference or whatever it was. There was so many different times where that would happen, and it would extend drives, and you just can't do that against a team that's wanting to run the ball a lot. I mean, like you said, 21 passes attempted, they had 30 runs, so they were able to stay in that positive run heavy thing and keep that going. And you can't allow them to do that. You want them to have to drop back on 2nd and 8, on 3rd and 8. You want that situation. You don't want them to just be able to sit there and keep giving their run game chances, because that's what you saw. There was plays when Dallas was on their keys. There was a lot of like -1 yard run, 0 yard run, 1 yard run. My wifey's in the chat. That there was a lot of those when Dallas is on their keys. It was they'd give up a 1st down, and you now give Arizona 2 more chances in the run game. As far as what they were doing in the pass game, there was a lot of man coverage, and it looked very obvious that Dallas was really struggling with the loss of Diggs, because I can't remember the guy's name, but it was number 26. People remember when you watch
Bland,
Bland. When you watch film, you don't see names on jerseys, you see numbers, and so I usually remember players by numbers of what I've watched on film. And 26 was getting cooked a bunch of times in man coverage, and it was just 8-yard outs, 10-yard outs, and a 10-yard comeback. It wasn't anything super complex that they were doing. It was just man coverage, and they were beaten. They were going after him. I want to remember they got like 3 or 4 first downs on him alone that then led to points on the drive when they were able to get the run game going again. It just gave them more chances in the run game. And that's again a case that I don't see them having that same success against San Francisco. I just don't see it. And another thing they did is they ran at Micah Parsons. They ran at him.
Right.
And he's an aggressive guy. He's got a lot of speed, but he's also a guy, he's going to shoot the gap. And so he's going to guess on where a play's going, and they would run at him and he would guess wrong a lot. You don't get that with Nick Bosa. So, they won't be able to run at Nick Bosa like they did Micah Parsons.
And I think that is going to be a key and a good transition to where we get to week 4, because we talked about how the Arizona Cardinals found a way to combat the Dallas Cowboys, running at Parsons, the way that they utilized the aerial attack, the way that they were able to kind of freeze the linebackers on those quarterback options in order to successfully, get some of those larger gains. Now against the 49ers, it's a different outlook defensively, especially with Dallas not having that elite corner in Trayvon Diggs anymore. How do you see the 49ers defense matching up against the Arizona Cardinals offense?
I just don't see them having somebody that is going to be able to cook our defensive backs one-on-one consistently. The Cowboys were obviously scrambling outside of an injury. Maybe there's a matchup to exploit there against Isaiah Oliver. He hasn't been the greatest in man coverage, but he also hasn't been as bad as he was in the preseason. So what do we do there? I see a lot of man coverage on early downs. Try and force, keep those one-on-ones, 5 defensive linemen front, keep Arizona from being able to get the cheap yards, and really, make them tough it out. And then once you get into 3rd and 8, that's when you're going to see some zone pressures. I think, I think that's where you force their quarterback to go through his reads. I think you're going to see a lot of fire zone in this. Steve Wilkes likes a lot of fire zone. I think he's going to come with a 5th rusher somewhere in there. Again, you want to fill the lanes there against a quarterback that wants to take off. You want to force him to go through his progression, so you fill the rush lanes. Don't give him a lane. So that means you're bringing a 5th rusher, and you're going to clog everything up. Even if you don't get home, you don't want to give him an escape route. So, I think that is something that I see us doing. A lot of fire zones late on 3rd down, man coverage, 5 defensive linemen in the early downs.
I think that, it's a good plan of what you're talking about earlier with the 5 defensive linemen, because when it comes down to some of these scrambles, even some of the quarterback options, you have the 5 defensive linemen. You're now having equal matchups across the board. You don't allow them to find a way to scheme against you. Obviously, that means you got to worry about the back end, because it could be a lot more man coverage, which puts a little bit of a bigger onus on your cornerbacks. But I also think that that's why this specific game, when you look at opponents matching up against other teams versus the 49ers, that's why I believe there's a stark difference when it comes to it. You talk about last week in the Dallas Cowboys, the way that they operate. Micah Parsons, phenomenal pass rusher, arguably the best in the NFL, but there are ways to scheme around him, or really scheme right at him in the run game. You talk about the other ways. The linebackers are much different when it comes to San Francisco, with the way that they have a quick trigger. And also, Fred Warner is one of the most instinctual guys in filling his gaps. The 49ers in their defensive scheme in the past do a great job of filling the gaps, which then really forces those run lanes to dissipate, and you kind of have to find some off schedule or create some different way in order to successfully run the football against the 49ers. I think that that's another element that they got to worry about. And the way the 49ers have been able to be aggressive and collapse on early downs, it forces third and longs, where a lot of the playbook then goes out the window. It's more so you got to find man beaters and figure out a way to beat them against this personnel with this defensive line unit. I think that that's why it's tough compared to other teams to just scheme against the 49ers, and why, while last week was probably a trap game for the Dallas Cowboys, I don't envision a similar result in week 4.
Absolutely. And, if anything, the Cowboys could walk in there saying, it's the Arizona Cardinals. It's this. But remember, Jonathan Gannon knew a lot about the Dallas Cowboys coming in. He had a big advantage there. He played them twice a year coming from their division. They didn't have a lot of advantage on him as far as what he was going to be doing offensively with this team. And San Francisco now is going to be able to look at this game and say, okay, we're not going to make the mistake that Dallas did. Obviously, Dallas had a lot of miscues. There's a lot of things they didn't do well. So we know what they're going to come in and try and do to us offensively. We're not going to let that happen. And I think the team, 10 days of rest. Now, there are some injuries that are piling up and that do make it a little concerning, but I just don't see an avenue for Arizona in this game to win.
I don't either. And that's why you talk about the injuries. I want to flip it, look at the other side of the field, because the offense versus the Cardinals defense, that's another battle to watch. The Cardinals, when you look at the way that they've played, they've been competitive not only on offense, but you're also required to be competitive defensively. Had one of the worst halves probably of the season when they played the Giants in in the first half in week 2, but then they shut them out, or sorry, in the second half, but they were very good in the first half, in forcing the Giants off the field and things like that. What do you see, especially with potential injuries to Jawan Jennings and Deebo Samuel? Jennings, it seems like he'll likely miss this game. Samuel, a game time decision. What do you see from the 49ers in their offensive outlook against the Cardinals?
So it's going to be a situation where Arizona is going to have to choose. Are you going to try and completely take away the passing game, or are you going to try and really be competitive in the run game? I don't think they can do both. I think it's going to be a situation where they're going to have to pick and choose what their coverage is going to be and how that's going to affect their alignments up front and their run fits. Jonathan Gannon is a Vic Fangio disciple. So when you see his defense, it's very Fangio-esque. There's a lot of things he does there that are very similar to what Fangio has done and does. And what that means is that there's going to be a big stress on trying to make the quarterback work post snap. That's a big point of emphasis for Vic Fangio. He wants to, he runs a multitude of matching zones, oftentimes starts out in a shell look, and then you're going to have things rotating post snap. What you're going to see is the first drive, the first maybe drive or two, there's going to be a lot of probing from Kyle Shanahan to see, are they coming with that weak side safety rotation, or are they coming with a strong side safety rotation to help on those rundowns? When we're in our base offense, are we going to be seeing that what you call cover 9 or cover 3? Cover 3 being the strong side safety, cover 9 being a weak side safety. Down in the box, which one are you going to see? Are you going to see where are they going to be bringing pressure? Are they going to be trying to come through the A gaps or the C gaps? Or is that's how Fangio plays a lot of his fire zones. And so I think that's what you're going to be seeing from Kyle Shanahan, is going, okay, what are you trying to do to slow down our run game? Now, if it comes down to Jawan Jennings is not able to go, to where Deebo Samuel is not able to go, I would be surprised if Deebo Samuel doesn't suit up in this game. He's listed as questionable. Jawan Jennings is doubtful. But if you have Ayuk and Ronnie Bell as your receivers, I see Gannon runs a coverage called clamp a lot. It's based out of like a Palms coverage, but it basically, the safety on Ayuk's side will try and help short and inside, and the corner on the outside is going to be playing a zone outside and matching anything vertical. And so I see them playing a lot of clamp. The problem with clamp is that it doesn't give you a really, really good run fit help. You're going to be keeping those safeties back on that. And so you're going to see a 2 safety thing now. And that doesn't lend itself well to what the 49ers love to do as far as their zones and their counters and all the things that they love to do in those bubble screens. Those become a little bit harder to defend when you're in a clamp coverage. So that's what I mean. I think they have to choose between, are they going to try and take Ayuk away, or are they going to try and really key in on the 49ers run game? And I think they're going to try and key in on the 49ers run game. They're going to have to invest a lot in that. And that also means that Gannon isn't going to be able to do in early downs what he wants to do. And that's bring that shell coverage pre-snap and not let Brock Purdy know exactly what is he's going to be facing. They want him to work post-snap. Kyle Shanahan's going to do everything he can to keep Brock Purdy from having to do that, so that he can be decisive, so he can get everything where he wants to be, and the ball rolls and the offense rolls. So, in that, I I don't see them matching up well against our offense. I think our offensive line is going to be able to push around their defensive line. You know, the one thing with Fangio's system is a lot of times anything goes vertical down the seams, you're going to have matching. So, you know, Kittle goes down the seam, it's going to be matched. Juszczyk goes down the seam, it's going to be matched. You bring in Ross Dwelly, he goes down the seam, it's going to be matched. What that means is that there's a play that Kyle Shanahan runs. It's called choice clear. And what you do is you run a seam route. It's not even in the progression, but you run a seam route because that affects the rules of a defense, like what Jonathan Gannon runs, where they're going to have to carry that seam route, and then you bring Christian McCaffrey behind it on a choice route. So you vacated that seam, whether it be in cover 3, it's a linebacker or a safety, and now you have guys in space 5 yards away from Christian McCaffrey. One of them is going to have to try and pick him up, and they're going to figure that out. And Christian McCaffrey is going to be in there being able to run away from a guy who's 5 yards away from him already. You create a ton of space in there. It's one of Kyle Shanahan's favorite plays against matching zones. His choice clear, and I see us coming with a heavy dose of that with Debo if he's there. If he's not, Christian McCaffrey all day long. Juszczyk, get these guys ball in space against guys that just are not going to be able to match up. We saw what Christian McCaffrey did to the Cardinals last year. You know, he ran a freaking draw play for like 22 yards on 3rd and 18. And made like 3 guys miss, and right. They just don't have an answer for McCaffrey.
I like to see what that is on Sunday, but I like the point you bring up when you talk about, you know, matching zones, trying to mimic exactly what the offense is doing and things like that. But I do wonder how advanced those type of schemes are going to be against the 49ers with, you know, the new incorporation over there in Arizona. It's still 3 weeks in. The results have been pretty solid, I'd say, through 3 weeks, given their personnel, but I do wonder how it'll come out in week 4. One thing I want to throw at you, Gannon has had a tendency sometimes to be conservative with his approach defensively. Do you think the 49ers look to alter, and they got a lot of in-breaking routes, a lot of routes over the middle of the field, the intermediate portion, that's really where Brock Purdy thrives. Gannon's schemes sometimes look to try and take away those routes by being a little more conservative, short of the sticks, excuse me. Do you anticipate a change in identity for the 49ers in this game in relation to that? What have you seen from Gannon in that range, and what do you think the 49ers counter for that would be?
So that's very much the result of it being very Fangio-esque, right? So one thing that Fangio does as far as his coverage rules, that is different than a lot of guys, is those outside guys. He plays a lot of cover 4, a lot of cover 6. You see a ton of that from Fangio. Okay. And how the coverage rules work with him is when you're on a cover 4 side, that safety is going to pretty much stay flat footed, because on the outside, and he's going to be reading the number 2 receiver, the second receiver in from the sideline. That outside corner it has what's called a man match. So he's going to man up in a matching zone at a certain trigger point. And what that trigger point in Fangio's system is I believe it's 8 yards. It's in it's in some of the playbooks, is that it's 8 yards off the line of scrimmage, vertical from number 1. So if your number 1 is going to go vertical at 8 yards, the outside corner immediately triggers man coverage. It's called man on demand. So he's going to man up. And so if that receiver is running a post route from the outside, that corner is responsible for covering that. The safety is not responsible for that. That allows those safeties to play everything in that intermediate area very aggressively. They don't go deep unless they're threatened by the number 2 receiver. So that means your in-breaking routes from there, and that those in-breaking areas don't open up unless you're really going deep from your inside guys and you're pulling those safeties out. And then they'll shadow from the opposite side of the field with the safety. So those 2 safeties sit in the middle of the field, and they're just going to basically keep a cone of vision over the middle to look to match anything that's coming from the other side. So what Shanahan, we always see the dagger concept, where he'll run a guy down the seam. You have a dig in behind it. That's going to clear out the one safety, but that other backside safety is going to be reading for that dig, and he's going to look to jump it. And the corner is also going to be looking to match that dig. So they're going to come one underneath, one over the top of that dig. They're going to try and double that. And that's why he's has so much success at taking that kind of stuff away. What you have to do, where his defenses are very vulnerable, is usually short outside. So that means quick outs. That means swing passes. That means stick routes. You're going to see a heavy dose of that early on to complement the run game. That's what I see them doing. The only way you don't have that and you start to open up the middle is you force them to start going middle of field closed or single safety defenses. That's where Fangio's defense doesn't have the matching rules that can take that stuff away as well. You can start to hit some of those crossers, some of those digs, but you got to get them in single high. So that means you set it up with a run, you keep coming at them, you win your matchups inside on those defensive tackles, and you really stress them.
Talking about those, what do you call it? The game plan for the 49ers offensively. Talked about some of those short routes, stick routes, things like that. Do you envision a similar start to or really a similar approach to the way the 49ers played in week 3? More screen heavy, things like that, balls at the line of scrimmage and then working in space against this defense? Or do you envision maybe less of that, understanding that Arizona might not have as strong of a pass rush, allowing the 49ers to drop back and get into their full kind of scope of things offensively in the passing game?
I see it as more you're going to see stuff like now return routes. So it looks like a now route from the number 2 where he's coming short across the field and then he returns back outside. That's one way that you help trick the because a lot of times Gannon's defense is reading the release in the number 2. If he goes out quick, that corner is going to jump that route. And so what you need to do is either your number 1 has to just run like a little quick out or a curl, much like what we saw the Rams do against us week 2. Think about how they started out that game. That's what you should see from the 49ers very much early on in the pass game. Or you run these now return routes, or you run a choice out China, which looks like a choice out, and then it returns back inside. Something that's going to hit that kind of around between the numbers and the hash. That's where I think we're going to look to feast, is in between the numbers and the hash. But it's not going to be just release and go right out. It's going to be something that sets the defense up one way and returns, because you have to come with these variations against the way that Gannon's defense matches, because it's going to convert based upon what you're doing. So it's kind of like you have to play cat and mouse with them. You make them think that you're doing one thing, get them to convert to what you want them to do, and then you come back with something to counter that. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of that real quick stuff. A lot of that, I mean, Wink Martindale blitzed 85% of the time. I mean, it was insane. Like watching the film, just like play after play after play, just blitz. And when you watch the 49ers first, I think it was in the first 3 drives, there was one drive where we gave up 2 third and long, or we converted 2 third and longs. And those were plays where New York actually didn't come with a blitz. It was like the 2 times they didn't come with a blitz and it was third and long, we burned him, one with his tunnel screen to Debo, one with a screen pass to a little slip screen to McCaffrey, and burned them both for big gains. And from there, it was like Wink Martindale was like, screw it. We're not dropping back in zone. We're not dropping back in coverage. We are coming every single play. And so that's what you saw a lot of them having to do, was throw routes early, throw it to a spot and let your receiver go get it, hit that landmark. And I don't see it quite being the same way, because you're going to have so much dropping in coverage and eyes on the quarterback, eyes on the receivers and reading the routes. That is very Fangio. That's very Gannon. That's what they do.
Good analysis there, as always, from Johnny D. I gotta ask you though, because we touched on it a little bit, but we got injuries. Unfortunately, 49ers have injuries. We've got a few players that are questionable: Dre Greenlaw, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, Ambry Thomas, but the most important one is Deebo Samuel, who has a knee injury that he's nursing. That's the main issue, that he felt some soreness after the Giants game. Jawan Jennings is doubtful to play. Let's assume both, for some reason, don't suit up. What do you anticipate from Brandon Ayuk here in week 4?
I think they isolate him as the X receiver, get him away from the tight end. I think you're going to see a lot of trips if that happens. You're going to see them do that because that changes the coverage rules for Gannon's defense. When it's a trips defense, there's going to be a lot of kind of eyes towards the trip side, and they usually leave that backside corner. They leave it on a flat and corner combo there, and that's where Ayuk's going to be able to feast in that intermediate area. Again, I think it's going to be between the numbers and the hash. That's where he's gonna live. Um, there's a lot of options you have there against that kind of a look if your receiver can beat their corner. And I think Ayuk, with what I've seen from him this year, has become that X receiver that I've been dying to see us have, and I've been just wanting, believing that Ayuk could do it. I've wanted to see him do it for about 2 years, going, man, if the potential's there, if he hits it, it's going to be really exciting. And we're starting to see that. And I think this is a game that they do that, and those guys can't go. You're going to see Ayuk have a big game, and where people are going to start really talking about Ayuk as, is this guy is going to make the Pro Bowl this year? Is this guy that is going to be in the conversation for one of the top 5 wide receivers in the NFC? I think that's what you're going to see if that happens this game.
Brandon Ayuk, he couldn't be, in position for one of those week 1 type of games where the 49ers thus far, when we look at it, haven't really force-fed people. But last week, no Ayuk, which meant more Deebo Samuel and more George Kittle. This week, if it's no Deebo Samuel or Jawan Jennings, that might mean Ayuk is, his volume might increase to the point where it was in week 1. But I talked about, the 49ers spreading the ball a lot, especially when healthy. Talk to me about what you've seen through the first 3 weeks for the team that's put up 30 points in each game and given up only 14 points a game through 3 games.
You're seeing a team that is winning pretty soundly and doesn't look like they're anywhere near their stride. That's what's exciting about this team. I think sometimes people maybe think, because at least on my end, I'm a 49ers fan, think, well, everything's just positive all the time. And I go, if you're being negative about this team right now, I don't know what to tell you, because the talent level on this team, it's not just a talking point. It is real. This team is so stinking talented, and there is so much there that they are able to do. And when you have a quarterback playing as efficiently as Brock Purdy is, playing with the kind of moxie that he's playing with, the poise that he's playing with, the throws that he's making, I mean, I think the most frustrating thing for me coming out of the last game was feeling like people were like, because I had some people tell me, why didn't you show, Brock Purdy's rough start? And I was like, I don't think he had a rough start. I think they were adjusting to the insane amount of pressure that New York was bringing. I mean, it was unreal, the amount of pressure that New York was bringing and where they were bringing it from. And there was a couple off-target throws. There was a corner made a heck of a play. It was that play that, George Kittle bats it away. That guy was a curl flat defender, and we had a route to the flat. He didn't even respect that at all, and he bails out of his zone to go try and get that ball. And Brock Purdy is like falling back and trying to throw it, and I don't think his vision could even see that guy sitting there, bailing out of his zone. And then the near pick to Deebo that was in the end zone, that didn't look so great. Well, that's the same exact play we came back and hit Ronnie Bell for a touchdown on later in the game. So I'm looking at and some of the throws that he made in that game. He made the throw to George Kittle down the sideline. It's just unbelievable throw, especially with how messy the pocket was.
Right.
The throw he made to Juwan Jennings over the middle on a little post route was just on the money. A layered throw over the underneath guy in the window. The throw he made to Ronnie Bell. The throw he made to Deebo on the big touchdown on a sluggo that was set up by the play that got batted in the air the earlier in the game. I mean, that corner jumped that slant route as hard as I've ever seen a corner jump a slant route in my life. Dude's playing 10 yards off, stays flat-footed the whole time, and drove on that slant route. Like, he was expecting a slant from Deebo the entire way. I don't look at that and say, I looked because when I watched that play, I'm like, yeah, we got lucky that it tipped up and Ronnie Bell caught it, but I don't blame. There was nothing in that play that said Brock Purdy should not have thrown that ball. Mm-hmm. That corner just went balls out to make that play. And that's why he gave up a touchdown later, because we made it was a double slant concept, isolated on the field side. So we came back, made it look like a double slant. Debo runs a sluggo, slant and go, and we get the touchdown. So yeah, kudos for the guy for jumping on the route early, but then Kyle Shanahan with Brock Purdy has the trust to say, well, now we're going to run the sluggo on that, and I think you can rip it into a spot. And then you score a touchdown. When you start seeing these things, it was like the offense is playing at such a high level. I can't sit here and justify talking about like 5 negative plays when there's like 30 amazing plays. This team is just so stinking talented, and they can stay relatively healthy. I mean, thankfully we haven't had any major injuries. It's looking like kind of banged up stuff. It's scary what this team can do. I don't think there's a team in the NFL that this team cannot beat.
That is a sign, definitely, that 49er fans are going to be happy to hear. But I have to say that at the moment, I agree with you, because I don't think this team is near its ceiling. And they have been dominant through 3 weeks. I mean, they started off with one of the hottest halves I've ever seen Kyle Shanahan have, with the way that they played against Pittsburgh in that first, I'd say 50 or 25 minutes or so of the game where they were up 20-0. That was a very hot half. And I mean, it's continued through 3 games. And when you look at everything that you point out, right, Brock Purdy, very good that first half was probably the best of his career, I'd say, in a way, with the way that he played against Pittsburgh. And overall, even when he's had the ups and downs, it's come with a certain caveat. This past week, it came with an exorbitant amount of blitzes, to the fact that it was the most ever in the next gen stats era, which is,
I mean, that's wild.
Years and years and years of data. And of course it came with, Wink Martindale at coordinator, who has been up there. But that's where you're saying, if you still find a formula, if you find a formula to beat them like that and still beat them handedly, where the 49ers, that game was very weird in that, it felt not like the 49ers. It felt like the 49ers were playing their B or C game at certain portions of the game. Yet, if you look back, I mean, they were up by 2 scores for a majority of that game. That was that's just telling of how, against a playoff team last year, the 49ers did not look good, and they were able to win by 18 points in a way. And so that's the difference in this year's team. It seems like there's an increased amount of energy overall. We know on paper how good the team is, but the translation from on paper to on the field, I think, has been seamless this year. Whereas last year, you could point at certain players, the issues, not only in terms of their production, but also injuries, right? You had the defensive line injuries. Ark Armstead missed a good amount of games. Kinlaw missed a good amount of games. Offensively, Deebo Samuel did not look like himself for a portion of last year. Brock Purdy, I mean, you could talk about the quarterback issues where you go through 3 quarterbacks and things like that. But this year, everything seems seamless at the moment for a team that came in with high expectations. It's been a good start for sure. And I think that for me, it's like we see how powerful this offense can be, which is why my focus transitioned to the defense. And when we were nitpicking, right, about the defense, one thing I said at the beginning of the offseason is the number one issue we have with our defense right now is our third cornerback. When you're talking about the third cornerback, that's a good sign. I mean, if it's your third quarterbacks, that's the issue. I was talking with Vish Kumaran about that. And I mean, it thus far, I have to say I'm surprised. Well, not surprised, but I'm impressed with the way 49ers have played through 3 weeks.
Yeah, and on the defense, what's so exciting about the defense is that they're so talented, and they're not anywhere close to firing on all cylinders.
Right.
And they're still, like you said, only allowing 14 points a game. Okay, well, let's put that in perspective. The Legion of Boom gave up like 14 points a game on the season and was the best defense in the NFL that year. This team does not look like it's even hit full stride. And I think some of that is the change from D'Amico Ryans to Steve Wilkes, that they're still learning each other. Like you said, some of that is that third corner spot. There's been some movement there with Ambry Thomas and Isaiah Oliver, and what's really going on. Is Lenore playing the slot? Is Oliver playing the slot? Is Ambry Thomas playing outside? And I think I tweeted it out while I was watching the film from the Week 1 Steelers game, that I said the only negative on the game was that Ambry Thomas had a really rough end to that first half and got pulled. And people started commenting back. They're like, no, he was in the concussion protocol. He came up because of injury. And I said, no, he came back later in the game. He was in on special teams, and he
Right.
was in on Hufunga's interception. He was on the field during Hufunga's interception later in the game. He was pulled because of what I saw on him doing wrong on defense. And Kyle Shanahan was asked about it that week in the presser, and
Yeah.
it kind of had his snarky Kyle on it. He was like, well,
He
I
didn't
can't really
want us.
tell you.
He's like, I can't tell you,
Yeah,
but
he's like,
if
I can't tell
look
you.
at the film.
He goes, if you watch the film, you might be able to figure it out. That was the part that got me of like, if you can figure it out on film, go ahead and try and figure it out. What happened there. Well, what had happened is it had everything to do with Ambry Thomas not playing the scheme right, not playing situational football. They started out, they ran a quick out against him. I think it was cover 3. We were in, they throw it to the flat. He goes to tackle the guy, tackles low. You don't tackle low in that situation. You tackle high. You tackle high because you want to push the guy back, even if he goes out of bounds. You want to force a backwards movement because then you get a forward progress spot. You don't get an out of bounds spot. Forward progress spot keeps the clock running. You're in the 2-minute drill. You tackle high. He dove for the guy's legs. The guy jumped over him, went out of bounds, stops the clock. That you can't do that in that situation. Then we ran palms coverage a couple times. He was supposed to convert from a deep quarter to a cloud coverage or flat coverage. Didn't convert, didn't read the release in the number 2 right. They get a quick out. It's like 7 yards, boom, out of bounds. They did this twice, got 14 yards, 14, 15 yards on that. Okay, both times, palms coverage doesn't convert right, doesn't read the release in number 2 right. Okay, you're now giving up again 2 more plays out of bounds in the 2-minute drill. You're not playing your defense right. Then I think we went cover 3. A guy drives him deep, comes back to the ball. He keeps with like a 6-yard cushion the whole way. The guy catches it on his way back to the quarterback, then is able to turn again, get back up field, get out of bounds. You can't do that. You've got to compete on those. You got to get up on that guy, make it a forward progress stop. There was 4 plays. He let them get out of bounds in the 2-minute drill. You can't do that. That's why Ambry Thomas got pulled. He wasn't playing the details of the coverage right. Isaiah Oliver hasn't been as good in man coverage as I think Ambry Thomas has been, but he was playing the situations much better. We saw that against the Rams. We saw him, it was like a 3rd and 1. He made a tackle for a 1-yard loss on a quick out. Boom. That's playing situation football. He tackled well. He was physical. Okay. You love that. Then he has the 4th down stop against the Rams. You love that. He's been hit a couple times against the Giants on some crossers and things. Those are tough to cover, but that has been one area that he's really struggled in, but he's physical. And that's what you like to see. Ambry Thomas, there was a play, I think it was in the 1st or 2nd drive of the Steelers, week 1. Cleveland Farrell disrupts the play. They're running a wide receiver reverse. Ambry Thomas, there was like 5 guys who end up on that tackle after Farrell disrupts it. Ambry Thomas was was one of the only guys in the area who didn't get in on that tackle. He didn't look like he really wanted to make a tackle there. And he's the one guy who doesn't get physical in that moment. Though that's what you can't have. I like Ambry Thomas. I want to see him do well. But I think right now, Isaiah Oliver is going to be the guy that sits there and stays there. And I want to see grow. I want to see him be as effective as Jimmy Ward was last year. Jimmy Ward was phenomenal in that nickel spot. And that's what you want to see from Oliver as it goes. Can he lock that down? And if they can, and they can do that, man, this defense could be scary good.
Right. And I mean, you point out, again, those were these small issues with the 3rd corner. And despite all of that, how many points did those issues really give up? It was 7 points at the end of the first half there in that Pittsburgh game. And so there are certainly, like Johnny is saying, certainly things the 49ers can improve on. And we're hoping that those improvements gradually come throughout the season. But it's a good sign to start the season that the 49ers can overcome these types of issues and still have, pretty comfortable wins over opponents.
And it also speaks to the standard that is being held on that defense. I mean, when that's what happens, when it's like 4 rough plays that, let a team go down and score, you're yanked and somebody else is going in, that's iron sharpens iron. That's, a high expectation of excellence on this defense. And we haven't had that some years. Some years it was like, well, we got 9 guys who are going to give up a touchdown, but we got 2 guys we believe in. So seeing where they're at, that this is where it's at, is really exciting. Like we said, 14 points a game. I mean, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
You get down to 10 points a game, you're talking like 2000 Ravens kind of defense. And the scary thing is I think they can do it with the talent that they have. They've got to be healthy. Now they haven't also been playing some offensive juggernauts, but I think they can do it. And one thing that's really helped that is Brock Purdy's protected the ball. He has not put the defense in a bad position. He's really helped them stay where teams have to drive long drives against this defense.
That is exactly where I was going to lead in for the end of today's show. We talked about Brock against the New York Giants, talking about him protecting the ball. What improvements have you seen from year one to year two in Brock's game that have led to the quarterback play we've seen thus far?
I think the biggest thing you're seeing is timing with his receivers. Brock Purdy, the film on him last year was really good. I've said it a number of times to people that he did not look like the most extraordinary thing about him was how much you didn't notice him on the field, in the sense that you didn't sit there and feel like you were watching a rookie, let alone a 7th round rookie, let alone the last pick of the 7th round. It felt like you were watching a 4 or 5 year vet quarterback out there. And that's just carried over, that there's a ton of poise there, accuracy with the ball. He makes good decisions. He's getting through his progressions. He's making the right reads. He's not getting confused by what the defense is doing. He's not panicking. And what you're seeing now is he's able to tie in, like what you saw last year was that he was a little slow to pull the trigger on some plays, because there was this, you could almost sense like, I'm not 100% sure if that guy's going to make it to the landmark that I'm going to be throwing at, where my landmark is on all these. Because again, he was getting very few reps on a lot of this stuff before he was starting. He was getting like 2 or 3 passing reps a day in training camp that off season, So it wasn't like this guy had a Rolodex of reps to go back to. Right now it looks like he understands that timing with his receivers. He's understanding their body language. He's understanding where they're going to be when they're going to be there. And that's the difference. I don't think there's a lot of growth as far as reading defense. I think it's always been at a high level. What you're seeing now is just that the timing with those receivers there. And you saw it like some of the throws that he was making towards Debo against these blitzes. He's throwing to a spot. The throw he made to George Kittle along the sideline, he was throwing to a spot. And he threw that before really George came out of his break. The throw he made to Ronnie Bell, he threw that way before Bell came out of his break. He's throwing it to a spot, and he knows he's had to work with Bell. He's had to work with his receivers to know it's going to get there and it's going to be on the right timing. That's the biggest thing I think you've seen. He's protecting the ball really well, and it's just everything's going. You couldn't ask for a better start for Brock Purdy.
And again, it's a lot of discourse has been there around Brock Purdy this offseason, ranging from the absolute highs comparing him to all-time greats to the absolute lows who are at disdain that he is still on the team or still the starting quarterback or whatever. And I think that there's just got to be a nice fine line for evaluating his play. Brock Purdy has improved from year one, and right now he's looking like a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. I have him in that 10 to 15 range about. Again, more play will continue to come, and we'll continue to see how Brock Purdy evolves, but it's been nice. I mean, you talk about the timing with his receivers, and this is something that Brock Purdy knew coming into the NFL that it was going to have to be a significant highlight for him, because when you necessarily don't have the strongest arm in terms of velocity, you how do you make that up? Anticipation and timing. Anticipation and timing is where Brock Purdy is really getting there. With the anticipation, he's able to read the field well in order to set up his receivers to get the ball open to them in space and get the ball open to them even before some breaks are being made. And then it's the timing portion as well. Just getting the route combinations down, understanding where players are going to be at a spot when at what time, so that you can match the two, the anticipation and the timing. And that's something Purdy has done. And when you look at the completion percentage and as well as the amount of volume in the intermediate range of the field, there's something clicking there. And I think that right now, the emergence of the 49ers, well, not emergence, but really the significant highlight that they're producing every single week is starting to have people question, do you really need that deep ball, or the consistent deep ball, in order to win games? And yeah, you could argue we had this similar conversation a couple of years ago or whatever, but at the moment the 49ers offense is rolling, and it's implementing all three levels of the field at a good rate, with Purdy obviously utilizing the intermediate portion of the field at a to a high caliber, to a high degree. And it's been a solid start. Definitely been a solid start for Purdy, who has improved on the turnover worthy plays. Obviously, zero turnovers in the air thus far. It's been a good sign. The one fumble in week one. But if you're having a quarterback who's consistently making good decisions, with mixed with an offense that the 49ers have, where explosive plays come at such a high rate, guess what? You're moving the ball very quickly. And also, the number one thing for me was, when you have, a quarterback or something like that that operates like Brock Purdy, as long as you're able to sustain the amount of explosive plays, your offense is going to click. Because the number one issue is, you don't want to have to sustain long drives. With Brock Purdy, that hasn't been the case. You're having these explosive plays happen. You're having different drives. It's not like 10 play drives every single time or something like that. Instead, you're able to click, and that obviously increases your margin for error. And the 49ers really haven't needed the margin for error thus far with the way that they've played.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said it for a long time. Kyle Shanahan's offense is not based around a heavy dose of deep outside the numbers. Why? Because he's a numbers analytics guy. As far as percentages, Richard Sherman has talked about this. How much Kyle Shanahan would talk about. We do this, we have an 80% chance of winning. We do this, we have an 85% chance of winning. We do this, turnovers, and you hear coaches talk about this. You got to run the ball. You don't turn the ball over. Okay, it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to build your offense around that. And what consistently across the entire NFL for 50 years has shown is the lowest rate of success in NFL offenses deep outside the numbers. Those are the lowest success rate plays that teams have. It's something like, even the best teams, I think, like the Mahomes over the last few years, is like 55% on those deep outside the numbers plays. Kyle Shanahan's wanting like 80% plus success rate on plays. And you see that intermediate passing game. Brock Purdy is something like 85%, 90%, something like that, in the intermediate area. That's why we feast there. That's why everything ties into that, and it sets everything up, and you get the run game. Yes, we are going to take shots, and the problem was the last few years wasn't the volume of shots that we were taking, is that we didn't hit the ones that we had, even when there were gimmies. And I love Jimmy Garoppolo. That was something that was so frustrating, was to see Kyle Juszczyk running wide open down the sideline, and you'd miss him, or George Kittle running wide open down the sideline, and you'd miss him. And, you got to hit those when you have those opportunities. That's been set up. That was what differentiated Matt Ryan, MVP Matt Ryan, from 2013, 2014 Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan threw fewer deep passes in 2016 than he had his entire career leading up there, but he was hitting them at an insanely high rate because it was very strategic when they would do that. That is what Kyle Shanahan wants. When you look at the deeper throws that they made against the Giants, it was set up by something in the game. This wasn't just, we're throwing deep to open up the run game. No, the run game and the short passing game set up the home run shot. And that's the thing that I think is frustrating me when I hear people talk about the ends. We have to throw this to open up the run game. No, that's not Kyle Shanahan's thought process. His thought process is, I'm going to run the ball. I'm going to hit the intermediate passing game. I'm going to run it at you again with another way. I'm going to use that to set up my split zone run that's going to go for 50 yards. I'm going to use that to set up my screen pass. All this, though, that in first play of the fourth quarter, I can come out and I'm going to hit you for a 50-yard throw out on the outside. That's going to, be 30 air yards, where everyone's going to go, oh, it wasn't really that deep, but it's wide open, and it goes for a big chunk play. That's Kyle Shanahan's offense, and that's what you're seeing. It's so, everything is running so well, and Brock Purdy is taking care of the ball, and he's making those good decisions. And I equate. And I want to be careful how I say this, because it comes across people saying, well, you're saying he's an all-time great. No. I'm not saying Brock Purdy's an all-time great. He's got to put together seasons of play like this to start being considered in that, elite category or whatever. I don't even sometimes like saying that, because it tends to be elite, tends to be something that's just a guy who's playing quarterback really well, who has incredible physical tools. That tends to be who only makes it to the elite level, guys who play at a really high level but don't have physical tools, never considered in that elite category. But we look at Tom Brady for the first 6-7 years he was in the NFL, won like 3 Super Bowls. People were still making the argument with Tom Brady after 3 Super Bowl wins that it was really the system he was in. It was the playmakers around him. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't really carrying the team. He wasn't doing the kind of stuff that you'd want to see to really say he's this absolutely great quarterback. Well, Tom Brady had that underrated value on him until he wins 7 Super Bowls and comes away with the most Super Bowl and appears in 3 more. That's an insane career for a guy who it took till he was like 30 years old for people to start saying, okay, there may be something to this guy. I think you're going to see that same track record with Brock Purdy if his career goes on the same thing. I'm not saying he's there yet, not saying
Right,
that,
right.
but because of the style that Brock Purdy plays, it's going to be a way. You're always going to hear this, that it's about the playmakers he has around him, because it's going to be about delivering the ball, getting the ball in his guys' hands where they can run after the catch. And I think you're always going to hear this doubt about Brock Purdy. So I've just almost come to terms with it. Like, you're going to see people on Twitter sitting there saying, it's, the system, it's Kyle Shanahan, it's all this stuff. Same thing happened to Tom Brady. People can do that. They can talk about it. And when the 49ers are hoisting their 8th Lombardi, then maybe he'll start getting some credit.
Yeah, I mean, if it gets to the 8th Lombardi, 49er fans are going to be berserk. I mean, even if it gets to 1 Lombardi, that's what they're hoping for. But hey, Brock Purdy, you continue to do you, because right now, I mean, he's performing, he's exceeding expectations, and he's climbed into the top 15 range after some analysts. One guy had him at 29, but some analysts
That's just
had him
insane.
outside the top 20. And so he's in that top 15 range, and he's continuing to improve. But more importantly, the 49ers are playing good football, and they've got a ton of room to improve, despite being one of the top teams in the league, or looking like one thus far.
I mean, there's only 2 other teams that are undefeated.
Yeah, exactly. But Johnny, this has been a very fun show. I always love picking your brain, getting you on here, talking through what you've seen on the film. We talked about the Arizona Cardinals, talked about the stylistic differences between the Arizona Cardinals' last opponent in the Dallas Cowboys and the 49ers, the week 4 matchup on both sides. Talk some Brandon Ayuk, Brock Purdy, and how the 49ers have played thus far. Any plugs you want to shout out before we head on out? I know you had an interesting one you told me right before the show.
Yeah, I got a new sponsor, White Oak Pastures. You can go to whiteoakpastures.com/JD49 and check out their stuff. I got a package from them today. It came in. It was shipped. It literally shipped out from their farm yesterday evening, arrived at my door at 5:20 p.m. Now, granted, I only live about a 6-hour drive from Bluffton, Georgia, but it's grass-fed grass-finished beef. I got an 8-pound Packer brisket that is thawing in the fridge right now that I can't wait to put on my smoker. I've seen some guys who've cooked that exact same one from White Oak Pastures. All they used was some sea salt, some smoke, and some confidence. And that's what I'm looking forward to. Now, I am going live on my channel with my co-host, Adam Marino. We're going live in 1 hour. So if you want to stay tuned for that on my channel, we will be going live in 1 hour.
Go ahead, go check that out, because he does amazing stuff. That's why I bring him on here. Johnny, as always, I appreciate you. Guys, we're going to have a little bit of a different setup when we come back next, changing a little bit on the channel, but appreciate you, Johnny, and everybody.